So we'll try and recover from all the excitement of that play. But as you can tell, we're looking at King David today. And we've just acted out just that really well-known story, David and Goliath. Most people know about that. But that's not the only thing that happens in David's life, is it? And so to start, I actually want us to talk to the person next to you, and I want you to chat about, what parts of David's story can you recall? What's the key events in David's life? What's the background to him becoming a king? What happens once he is king? And to cheat, you can also skim through 1 and 2 Samuel if you want to. And if you're new to church, you don't know anything about David, you didn't even know about Goliath, don't stress, just say to the person, I know nothing, let them do the heavy lifting. And I'm going to give you a minute. So talk about, what do we know about David's life? What can you recall from what you've read in the Bible? And we'll report back in just a moment. Let's start with, and just call out, and I'll repeat it so that Diana can hear. Just start with, what's the background before David even becomes king? What's the background to the nation of Israel, say? Anyone just yell out. Don't be afraid. We won't shoot you down if you're wrong. We might get that sling out, maybe. No. Someone yell out. The background to the nation of Israel before David came around. What's the background? Yes. Yep, so they grumbled, they wanted a king. They were actually already in the promised land that God had given them, but they're like, we want a king like the other nations around us. And in Judges, it said, in those days, everyone did as they saw fit. There was no king, that sort of thing, yep. And so, as someone said, they started with Saul, but Saul wasn't a very good king, was he? Now, who can remember, maybe you talked about it, who can remember how was David actually chosen? How did that come about? Anyone remember that part of David's story? Yeah, he was anointed by Samuel. Tell us a little bit more about how that came about. So, how did Samuel choose him out of who he chose? Yes, yeah. So do you remember that part of the story? There's all these big burly brothers and you think, that's who's going to get chosen to be king, but they have to go off and find the shepherd boy, don't they? Because he's a man after God's own heart. Yep. God doesn't look at outward appearance, he looks at the heart. Okay, so he's chosen, but he doesn't become king straight away. Saul's still king actually for quite a while, and that's actually the period where David defeats Goliath. What else can you remember maybe during that time where Saul is king, David isn't quite king yet, even though he's been anointed? What can you remember from that time? Anyone want to yell out? Saul got jealous, yeah. So David has all these victories. I think the people love him. They say Saul has slain his thousands, but David tens of thousands. So Saul is jealous. He tries to get him with a spear, doesn't he? And he's chasing him. But when Saul's chasing him, what's another thing that happens? Who knows that bit of the story?
David had opportunity with them.
Yes.
It wasn't the Lord's time.
Yeah. So he could have gone and killed him. He was hiding in a cave. He could have killed him, but he just cut off a bit of his cloak, didn't he, to kind of show, hey, I could have killed you, but I didn't. Okay, eventually though, Saul is dead, and then David is anointed and crowned as king. What positive stuff happens in David's rule as king? What can you think of, positive things that happened? Anyone? Some of the older people doing the heavy lifting here. Let's get some younger people. Any ideas? Yeah, he unites the whole nation. They end up getting Jerusalem back, don't they? He brings the ark back to Jerusalem. And they have all these victories. The land's expanded. There's this sort of unified great nation suddenly under this king, isn't there? And God actually makes a big promise in 2 Samuel 7. When your days are over, I'll raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood. I'll establish the throne of his kingdom forever. There's a big promise, from David's kingship. Something's coming. All right, one more question then. So there's all this positive stuff in David's life, but there's also some negative things, isn't there? Some failures. Maybe this one's easy to remember. Yeah, Leo. Adultery or something. Yeah, that's right. So who knows about that? What happened there? Someone yell out. Not in too much detail. So he gets with Bathsheba, doesn't he? Her husband is off fighting on the front lines. David's chilling back in Jerusalem, and he takes someone else's wife. And then on top of that, he goes and has Uriah killed to kind of make him look okay. It's horrible. And Nathan has to confront him and rebuke him. There's one other big failure he did as well. Anyone know what that was? There was another big failure. We're pushing the limits here, I reckon, but yeah, who knows it? Yeah, he wasn't a good dad, yep. That's not what I was thinking of, but that's a good example, yep. Bang on, yep. So yeah, he made a census of how many fighting men Israel had. God had said, do not take a census, but he took a census. Maybe he was proud, maybe he was worried about, do we actually have enough men to fight? Even though God had given him victories with barely any men before. Actually, Israel was punished for that. It was a horrible time. And so David has this awesome life, but then there's some sort of chronic failures towards the end. Yeah? Okay, so despite those negatives, as we've said, David, kind of gave the nation of Israel a bit of a window into actually what it could be like with a king, the right kind of king. He pointed ultimately to the real king they'd need, one who would be truly blameless and upright. He pointed towards King Jesus. And we could easily do a bunch of individual sermons on any part of David's life. There's like 1 and 2 Samuel. There's a lot of material, really good reading there. But what I actually want us to do now is just to focus on how, through his life, something we didn't talk about, David is also known for all his psalm writing, isn't he? He wrote 76 of the 150 psalms. He's the author there. And so actually for the rest of the sermon, I want us to look into some of these psalms that he wrote. And the reason we want to do this is because it shows us, what is actually going on in David's heart. And by heart, I don't mean the organ that pumps blood around your body. No, it's his soul, it's his, inner being, his desires. Song lyrics or poetry express people's hearts. They're a window into the soul. And so as David reflects on these events, as he writes these psalms, we actually get to see his heart. We see how his heart responds to these successes and failures. In Acts 13, Paul's speaking, and he says that God testifies concerning David, and it was mentioned before, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. Now, what a remarkable thing to say. God is saying that David has within him a heart that is like God's. David's not God, he's not Jesus, he's still human, he's still very fallen, but God's given him this heart that is both, for God, and in perhaps some way like God. We see a glimpse, actually, don't we, of God's good design. We see, what God's heart is through David's heart. And so there's 3 things that I just want to briefly highlight that get revealed in these psalms. And the first of which is connection. David has this deep connection with God. His heart is connected to God's heart. Think about the relationships that you have or ones that you've observed. What would make you say that people have a deep connection with each other? People are deeply connected when they speak and that they share things with each other all the time. They're open with each other. They know each other to be honest, to kind of pour their hearts out, so to speak. When you're close to someone, you can say what you truly think. There's trust, understanding that works both ways. And it's this 2-way relationship we see with David. And we're going to look at a bunch of psalms. And Eva was on Bible reading. She's going to actually read the longer ones for them. If it's just a verse, I'll read it. And so let's start to see this connection that David has. We'll start with Psalm 5.
Listen to my words, Lord. Consider my lament. Hear my cry for help, my King and my God, for to you I pray. In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning, I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly.
Can you see? David speaks. He cries out, but he also listens. He actually expects that God will answer. And sometimes David, well, he's quite blunt. He's very direct with God. There's an expectation that God will listen to him. God will speak to him. Look at Psalm 13.
How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God.
He knows that God will speak to him. Like any close relationship, David's happy for God as he speaks to him as well to actually show the truth about him. If you're close enough to someone, you're happy for them to speak truth into your life. In Psalm 26, he says, "Test me, Lord, try me, examine my heart and my mind." Psalm 139, he says, "Search me, God, know my heart. Test me, know my anxious thoughts." You see, David wants to be, deeply known by God. He doesn't want some sort of superficial relationship with God. No, he wants, deep connection. Even in our kind of, closest human relationships, there's still a part of us that the other person can't quite get to, isn't there? They can't quite reach. The connection only goes so far, but no, with David, he wants to be fully known by God. And on the flip side as well, he also wants to know God fully. He wants God to know him. He wants to know God as well. He wants to be up close and personal. He wants that close relationship. Psalm 17, he says, "Show me the wonders of your great love." Or listen to this heartfelt plea from Psalm 63.
You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you, in a dry and parched land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory, because your love is better than life.
Can you see that David, he wants this intimacy? He actually wants to soak in the power, the glory of God. He wants to know that love, which, what does he say? It's better than life. David knows this close relationship where he knows God, God knows him. That's a source of absolute security and comfort. Look at Psalm 16. What does he say there?
I will praise the Lord who counsels me. Even at night my heart instructs me. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand I will not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure.
Now, I know it already feels probably like we're drinking from a fire hydrant here with all these psalms coming at you, but and there's plenty more examples I can give. But I just want to ask, are you getting this sense of the close connection that David has? Can you see that he's got a heart that actually longs for God? And that's both, challenging and inspiring, isn't it? It makes us evaluate our own connection with God. Do we ourselves have this sort of connection? Do we have this sort of two-way relationship? These kind of heart cries of David, our cries. Teach me, guide me, show me. God, please hear me, please answer me, please speak to me. Keep me, God, hold me, shelter me. I don't know about you, but I long for this kind of closeness in relationship with God. I want closeness, not distance. I want intimacy, not separation. I want to have that absolute honesty and connection. It's beautiful to see this, to see it and to hope for it, to desire it. It's good to think about what habits are we doing that are helping this closeness, and what habits are we doing that are hindering this deep connection. And so David's got this deep connection. What follows from this then is the second thing we see in his heart, which is he's also got conviction. Because David's got this strong connection with God, well, that leads him to have these really strong convictions. His heart, his mind are convinced about certain truths. And that's the case, isn't it? If you know someone really well, you're in the best position to kind of say truth or not truth about them. You're in the best position to know what they're really like. And David's first conviction is to proclaim that God is real. In Psalm 14, he says, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God." David's heart acknowledges that God exists. And not only that, his heart also acknowledges just how amazing, how set apart God actually is compared to us. Look at Psalm 8.
Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them.
David is so convincing. He's convinced that God is real, God is majestic, that God is so much higher than us. And that leads him to say in Psalm 16, "You are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing." Apart from you, I have no good thing. Or Psalm 37, "Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." It's remarkable, isn't it? There's that conviction of need, that conviction, that assurance that relationship with God will actually bring you every good thing. Can you see what he's persuaded by, what he's convicted by? There's a difference, isn't there, between a conviction and just a preference, say. A preference might be a strong belief, but it's going to change under the right circumstances. I might have a preference for apples over mandarins, but if someone holds a gun to my head, I'll go, yeah, I'll have a mandarin, that's okay. Preferences crumble. They crumble under peer pressure, family pressure, the threat of jail, threat of death. But convictions are things that are so firm within you that nothing can actually move them. They're things that won't break under pressure. And these are David's. God exists. God is majestic. He's above us. We need God. That's his convictions. He's also convinced that God protects us. Psalm 27, he says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Convinced he doesn't need to fear. "The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" Or Psalm 28, "The Lord is my strength, my shield. My heart trusts in him and he helps me." Again, I'm only just kind of starting to scratch the surface here, but you get a sense of these convictions that he has. And again, it puts the spotlight on us, doesn't it? It puts the spotlight on what our deeply held beliefs are. What are your convictions? What are your beliefs that nothing will actually move? What are the truths that you will not move from despite what pressure is put on you? Do we actually have deep convictions that shape the way you live each day, each week? Convictions that shape the decisions, the convictions that move the time and energy that you put into things. Or actually, some of these things that David says about God, or perhaps that you might sing here at church, they're actually more preferences to you rather than convictions. We sing here a line in a song that apart from God we'll have no good thing. Or we sing that delighting in him will bring us the desires of our heart. But then do our actions actually reveal that? Do our actions really reveal the true state of our hearts, our actual convictions? This is challenging to think about. And it's especially challenging because at this point we're only actually looking at, say, the more positive convictions that David has. Because in addition to these, David is also convinced of perhaps some harder realities as well. Look at what else he's convinced of in Psalm... I've missed one there. In Psalm 15. Oh, what's going on there? Yep, that one.
For you are not a God who is pleased with wickedness. With you, evil people are not welcome. The arrogant cannot stand in your presence. You hate all who do wrong. You destroy those who tell lies. The bloodthirsty and deceitful you, Lord, detest.
What else is David convicted of, that God requires holiness, that God's a God of judgment who judges those who reject him. In Psalm 15, he also asks, who can dwell or live with God? And the answer, verse 2, is that it's only the one whose walk is blameless, only the one who's righteous, only the one who speaks truth from their heart. He's convinced of these other truths as well. And it's chilling, really, because the other thing that David is convinced of is that God actually knows all our thoughts and our deeds and our actions. Now look at these verses from Psalm 139. What else is he convinced of?
You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways.
Yep, keep going.
Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?
The all-powerful, the holy God of the universe is also all-knowing, ever-present. That's a great comfort when your thoughts and ways are all blameless, but not so good when you're doing things that don't line up with his ways. And so it's actually a combination of these convictions that he has and his deep connection that he has with God that actually leads to the final thing we see from his heart, which is confession. David's connection and his convictions lead him to realise, wait a minute, I fall short of God's holiness. I fall far short of that. David realises he doesn't deserve to have nearness to God. And so his heart leads him to confess this to God. Let's look at Psalm 32. Again, it will be across 2 slides.
Blessed is the one whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Blessed is the one whose sin the Lord does not count against them, and in whose spirit is no deceit. When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy on me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer. Then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? The heaviness that David felt before he confessed his sin. There's nothing that takes joy out of life like unconfessed sin on your conscience. Sin loves it when we stay silent. Sin loves to be kept in the dark so it can kind of fester away at our soul. But David, in his heart, knows, no, I need to confess. I need that sin out in the open. I need someone to deal with my sin. And only God can do this. Now, this confession didn't always come naturally. We talked about Bathsheba and Uriah and how Nathan actually had to confront him on this. But David's response to that particular incident in Psalm 51 shows his need. He knows that he has to bring his sins before God. Only God can forgive. And so let's read this psalm as well.
Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, you only, have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. So you are right in your verdict and justified when you judge. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me.
Now, isn't those words actually a great mixture of connection and conviction and connection? It's all in there, isn't it? This window of Psalm 51 into David's heart is quite profound. We've actually played this song here at Bay before, a version that Sons of Korah do. Psalm 51, and it's fantastic to listen to. It's my go-to Spotify song, when I'm feeling the weight of my sin again. I love to listen to it, to pray along with it. And what's fascinating is actually where the prayer of this psalm ends up. You see, we've been saying all along, David's got this great heart. He's got this heart of connection and confession and conviction. He's a man after God's own heart. But what's David's prayer later on in Psalm 51? Now, what does David pray? Verse 10, create in me a pure heart, O God. Renew a steadfast spirit within me. Create in me a pure heart. Or Psalm 86, he says, teach me your way, Lord, that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart, that I may fear your name. You see, David knows that his heart is only going to be the way it is if God keeps doing that renewal in him. You know, God has shown David that at his core, his sinful nature is actually the problem. You know, he needs a change of heart. He needs God's grace to change him. You know, only God can give him or us that heart of connection and conviction and confession. You know, only God can give us a heart that knows him and loves him. You know, a heart that isn't divided, a heart that is now clean. And as Christians, you know, we believe that same heart transplant can happen to us when we come to faith in Jesus. You know, the Spirit comes, and the Spirit is what convicts us and changes us. We're given that new heart that is more and more like God's heart. And so, like David, we can continue to pray that prayer. You know, we can pray like him, create in me a clean heart. We can pray, give me an undivided heart. Keep doing that cleansing work that you've already begun in me. You know, that can be our ongoing prayer too. You know, we don't want to come away from today going, well, we need to be like David. I need to be more like David. Rather, we need to come away saying, I need God to give me a heart like David. God has to do that work in me. He has to change my heart. But will that be your prayer? You know, is that something that you genuinely desire? You know, is God moving in you to have that continual change of heart? You know, that thought of, I haven't arrived, my heart keeps wandering, my heart's still divided, there's still lots of spots in my heart. God, you need to clean my heart. You need to give me that undivided heart. Will that be your prayer? I actually want to invite the band up now. And we're going to sing the words of Psalm 51 together, because let's make this a communal prayer together. You know, let's sing, create in me a clean heart. You know, we need to keep asking God for this forgiveness. So let's pray it together. And if you genuinely want that, you can pray that prayer as you sing.